Welcome to the Gillcast here on the RotoGrinders Daily Fantasy Football Pod. I'm Sammy Reid. I am joined here by Nate Nohling. You can find him on Twitter at Nate Nohling. And Josh ADHD, you can find him on Twitter at Fantasy ADHD. And myself, of course, at Sammy Reid FI. Boys, this was a tilt-o-whirl of a Sunday. I have been just bathing in tilt, cloaked in tilt all freaking day. Nate, how was it for you, man?
Exact same. I mean, it was a brutal day.
What was the number, if you could point to one thing, the number one most tilting thing that happened to you?
Probably P. Ryan. I think the P. Ryan tilt was probably the worst. When the AB injury happened, at that point I just closed all my windows and couldn't watch another.
So what actually happened to P. Ryan? Because I got so tilted that I stopped, I closed all my stuff too, and I just started watching some of the games, and I just started focusing on games that I liked because I was already just drawing dead in fantasy. Why did P. Ryan suck so bad? How did this happen?
I mean, I don't know. First of all, Washington had 0 plays in the first half. I mean, he just every time they got the ball, it was a 3 and out. He averaged 2.6 yards per carry on the day. He only saw 2 targets. I mean, it was brutal. And it was one of those things where I thought my lineup still had hope. So it was I watched it with every last hope, where by the afternoon games, I knew I was dead. So the tilt wasn't as bad,
The
Mike Davis thing should be tilt, but I knew I was dead, so I didn't even care.
And Mike Davis was also a bad play, so you don't have to think about I should. No. You knew that was stupid.
Was he really a bad play, or is that just a bad play in hindsight? Because
he wasn't a bad player.
No,
I think you could make an argument that he was just fine for 4K.
You could make an argument, but that would be a fish argument, because Mike Davis. The thing about Mike Davis is he has a 0.0% chance of scoring a touchdown, and when you roster players that have 0 chance of scoring a touchdown, what are you even doing here? Why would you put this in a cash game lineup? But I did, and so did Nate. Josh, how was the day for you, man?
I tilted quite a bit, but I ended up breaking even for the most part. So
you're the big winner. You are. Yeah. I mean, that's amazing.
You don't get to tilt. You don't get to tilt today.
Yeah.
No, the only tilt I have is I made a couple of bad decisions pretty early in the day, and I got hooked on some plays that were really fishy and stupid, and I didn't back out of them like I have the past couple of weeks and do something smart. So really, that's my only tilt, but I can blame other things for it, but really I just made bad decisions. It was a bad process.
Well, boys, I mean, we'll get into all this. This is going to be a genuine Gillcast here, because we really haven't lived up to the name, I think, for the last 2-3 weeks. We've all been, for the most part, doing really well in cash, putting up 150s, 180s. Everything's been great. We've been rolling in it. Bitcoin's up. Everything's just rolling. And then week 15 comes, and I just got buried, just absolutely buried. So let's get into this bad boy. Josh, what did you end up with in DraftKings cash?
So I ran 2 lineups today. One lineup, the good lineup that actually got me paid out, was 134.5, and the garbage lineup was around 115.
I would murder a small family for 134 DraftKings points. I would bury them out in the desert and take my 134 points and feel real good about it. Nate.
I'm glad I didn't tell you about that earlier this evening then, before you had a family event. We might have a problem on our hands.
Yeah,
I would have been an accomplice, Sammy.
I would have been back for the podcast a whole lot earlier. We could have got this done. Nate, you and I actually landed on the same lineup, and I think this is the first time this has ever happened. Obviously, you and I talk pretty continuously, also with Davis throughout the week. We bounce ideas off each other, all this, but we've never ended up with the same lineup. Today we did, and I mean, it
did not work out.
This was a bad day for that to happen. How great would it be if it actually worked and we were dancing around, everything was good, and we were rejoicing? It just didn't work out like that. So the nice thing is we only have really 2 lineups to go over. So let's start it off with you, Josh. What did you do? And let's talk about your good lineup because we'll have enough fish things to talk about with our lineup, I think. So let's talk about your good one. What'd you do at quarterback?
I went with Blake Bortles at quarterback today. I felt super good about him going to this game. And then once they announced Fournette was out, he was kind of a lock button for me. So to me, it was easy. I mean, he was 5,700 today. I thought he had probably a 70% chance to go for 300. And like I said, once Fournette was announced that he was out, I just locked him in and went about my rat killing.
Well, let's just pause right there because even though Davis is not on the podcast to defend himself, I don't think there's any defending himself on this. Davis's big take of the week when Fournette was announced out is that Chris Ivory was a lock. And I actually, right before the podcast started, I went on to Google and I Googled the biggest fish in the world, which a week ago was the whale shark, but today it's the Maddox fish.
It's Davis.
And
I'm
Davis
thankful
Maddox.
for this because this is actually the only way I made any money this week.
Is you bet him.
Is because Davis would make fish bets with me. So Davis bet me on P. Ryan versus Ivory, and even though P. Ryan had a terrible day, he still had 200% of his points. So
Davis put American dollars, both side betting and in real live cash games, on Chris Ivory.
You guys should both donate that to a charity. Those are both bad bets.
The Ivory, the Ivory thing, maybe Fournette keeps, maybe that'll work out once, but it never seems to work out.
Fully egregious. I mean, this
thing
3 times this year.
Yeah, let's chat about the Bortles thing because I know a lot of people were on him. There were a lot of sharp people on him this week. I looked at him briefly, but just got concerned from looking at the spread of the game, looking at game flow, was just worried about passing attempts. And, Blake Bortles with, 29 passing attempts, I didn't think was going to be able to be, a viable, play. Did the passing attempt volume concern you at all, Josh, or no?
Not really. Based on his last 4 games, I mean, he's throwing pretty much in the mid-30s every week, to the upper 30s as well. I thought that he would hit 35 attempts today just because even when they've had the lead the last month, they have been a passing team. And we kind of talked about it last week, or I may have talked about it somewhere else. But in my opinion, Jacksonville is gearing up to have a very diversified offense going into the playoffs. We saw that. I think we saw that loud and clear today between the usage for Keelan Cole and then this Mickens cat that caught 2 touchdowns on 5 targets. That they're getting guys involved that we've never even heard of. Now, Keelan Cole we've heard of because he's become part of the offense over the last few weeks. But Mickens, I hadn't heard of him today, and he's out here catching touchdowns. So, to me, I think they're gearing up for something, and I think they want defenses to have to worry about Bortles throwing the ball to a menagerie of wide receivers.
Menagerie?
And,
look at you.
Wow.
Yes, menagerie.
Oh, snap. Where did you go to school, Josh?
Just down the street somewhere.
I feel a little
behind the gas station.
This is unbelievable.
The crazy thing about this game was, Marquise Lee was injured, and so it was like you thought, okay, obviously, they're just gonna fall apart. Who are these guys? When you talk about Jacksonville, you think of, Allen Robinson going down, you think of Marquise Lee going down. The fact that Blake Bortles was able to have his best game of the season, with the receivers that he had, that was impressive. Even though this Houston defense is, just a joke, it was still an impressive game from him. I'm not gonna lie.
So
my
most tilting part of this week, by far and away, was this game. Because I had D.D. Westbrook. I had 70% D.D. Westbrook across my GPPs. He ruined otherwise really good. I had a decent amount of God Gurley in GPPs. And, to have those lineups ruined with D.D. Westbrook is just so incredibly tilting. But the best thing that happened also came from this game, and it was that Davis Maddox, I kid you not, had Keelan Cole in his lineup, his cash game lineup, at 11 a.m. CST this morning. Nate and I roasted the F out of him. Just roasted him like, dude, you're such a fish. You are a complete idiot. What are you doing? You can't play this guy in cash. Davis switched his lineup, and he has Ivory. At one point, I text him this screenshot of the game cast from my phone, and it's 3 plays in a row. It's Blake Bortles passes to Keelan Cole for a 73-yard gain. Chris Ivory from the 1 rushes for no gain. And then Tommy Bohannon rushes to the right for a 1-yard touchdown.
It was lit. It made my day.
Yes.
The only thing that made today better was how bad that was for Davis. But, I mean, can we just talk about Ivory for a second? The dude had 17 rushing attempts and had 2.5 yards per carry. How many touches did he get within the goal line? And he got stuffed at the 1 every time.
Oh, yeah, he had to have been 5 from the 1-yard line.
It was glorious.
Tommy Bohannon, good. 2 carries, 2 yards, 2 touchdowns. I mean, he had a Bettis game today, late-stage Bettis, where he just falls over for 2 touchdowns.
This is unbelievable.
Took him right away from Ivory. It was fantastic.
Keelan Cole, 7 for 186 and a touch.
9 targets. 9 flipping targets.
Jaden Mickens, 4 for 61 and 2 tutties. Corey Grant got in the zone on the ground, and Tommy Bohannon got in twice. Yeah. And Chris Ivory was 17 for 42 without a target.
Chris Ivory had 3 rushing attempts within the 5-yard line that he could not convert.
This freaking game.
This game was just a middle finger to Davis. It's pretty much all it was.
So, I mean, this was such a jabroni fest. It's unbelievable that this game turned out how it did. I mean, we haven't even like gotten off of quarterback, but we had to talk about this game. We really did.
Yeah, it was nuts.
Yeah, so Nate, you and I went with Cam Newton.
Yep.
And that was I think the extent of the sharpness that happened in our lineups.
Cam was a pretty obvious play. I think. I mean, he worked out. I think obviously I wasn't expecting 4 touchdown passes from him, but I was expecting him to run a lot. He actually ran 14 times for over 58 yards, which is huge for him. But he ended up being the highest fantasy score on the week because of the rushing workload and with the 4 touchdowns. So, this Green Bay defense is bad. And, Cam can put up games like this. So I think this was a pretty clear spot. He was, I think, the chalkiest quarterback in cash.
Yeah. I mean, this game was really kind of fun because you had the return of Rodgers, who played kind of uneven. You had Greg Olsen, 12 targets, 9 catches, 116 yards and a touch. And I had a decent amount of Olsen in GPPs. Like, that was another
the game wasn't fun because I stacked Cam with Funchess and tilted that whole game.
How bad? That might have been the most tilting moment when Cam hit Funchess in the end zone. Funchess gets crunched and
in the shoulder. Yeah.
I mean, and he was done, and he ended up coming back, but he ended with 2.9 fantasy points. Mm-hmm. 2.9. I thought he was like the best receiver play as the week went on. I thought he was the best receiver play on the board.
Yeah, for his price, I thought he was the best play.
Unfreaking believable. Okay, so what did you do at the running back position, Josh?
Yeah, I went back to the well with Alex Collins today. I thought he had really a super game script that was kind of written for him early on. Just going against Cleveland, I thought Baltimore would bounce back a little bit, and they did, but he didn't really do a whole lot with his touches today. He had a lot of targets too, which I thought was very encouraging. But again, he didn't get in the box today. He just kind of middled, but he hit 2x value. He hit just over 10 points. So I can't complain too much about that. He hit his floor, and that's okay. And then I had Mark Ingram at running back. Pretty early on the week, I had P. Ryan in there and decided to get off of there and go to something I felt was a little bit safer. I thought New Orleans would probably have the best home game script this week outside of Jacksonville and maybe Minnesota. But the issue I had with Minnesota was that I thought that their scoring would be split up a lot more than New Orleans would be. So I paid up and I went ahead and got Ingram instead of Kamara. And it turned out that was the right choice in New Orleans this week. But, that was probably just the right side of variance, to be honest.
I wrote Ingram up as a cash play, like one of my core cash plays. I really wanted to get up to Le'Veon Bell. I really did. And I was just like, hey, like my initial builds, I just couldn't afford him with a lineup I liked. And so I said, hey, I think Ingram's in a great spot, all this stuff. And then I ended up not playing Ingram. And I played P. Ryan. Ingram smashed. And that was the story of my day. That's basically what happened. Alex Collins, did he get hurt at a point today? I wasn't watching that game.
I'm not sure. I didn't get to watch any of that game myself, so I'm not sure
I don't think he did.
what happened to him.
Okay.
I don't think he did because he still got the same amount of touches he's been getting. I think Javorius is still like a factor in that offense, so you're going to see that a little bit. And, I think Collins was due for some touchdown regression, which I think could be expected, but he definitely underperformed his expectation this week because, he got the workload. He had 12 rushing attempts with 8 targets this week, and it just didn't work out.
So I think it's probably appropriate to call Josh a fish right now, even though he scored so many more points than we did. Because no Kenyon Drake, Josh. No Kenyon Drake. What got you off of Drake? Because I thought he was like
Drake.
What's that?
I faded Drake. Even after the news where they announced Damian Williams was out, I decided I was going to fade Drake today because I just didn't like the prospective game script for Miami going into Buffalo today. I thought they were going to get smoked. And they ended up getting smoked, but Drake still got his, But I just didn't like it. Something smelled bad to me, and maybe that was me, the fish, smelling bad. But
you're smelling your own stinky fishiness.
Yeah, I did. And so I didn't tell you my third running back. So I flexed running back this week because there was another game script I really liked, and that was Latavius Murray. And, a lot of folks talked up Murray this week as a prospective guy that could get 2 scores and then a lot of yardage in a very, very positive game for them against Cincinnati. That worked out. I mean, Murray put up 17-4. McKinnon outscored him because McKinnon busted 100 yards receiving on a lot more target volume. But I'm not unhappy for 4,900 to get 17-4 out of Murray. But, back to Drake, the way I built my lineup this week, Drake didn't fit what I wanted to do unless I substituted him in for Ingram. But I liked Ingram's upside so much more than Drake's that I decided to go that direction and then take the pain at wide receiver.
So for me, Drake was, I think I started my lineups. I just went Newton and Drake and started kind of going from there. Nate, why don't you talk about a little bit about your kind of just analysis on Drake and why you thought he was a smash play?
Yeah, I mean, for me, Drake was, I think, the lock of the week. I think he had the best workload projection for his price by far. I think, I like Ingram, but at the end of the day, like Kamara is a thing and does take workload from him where, Drake ended up with, I think, the highest expected points this week from all running backs. Second to Kareem Hunt. But I mean, this Drake thing, he ended up with, 16 rushing attempts and 11 targets. And if his quarterback wasn't Jay Cutler, who can't apparently make a dump off, this could have been a huge game for Drake. And I think 23 points was, even below his expectation, like from his workload. And at his price tag, I thought Drake was just the lock of all locks on this slate.
I did too. And the reason is because the 2 games that Damian Williams has been out, he's getting 80% of the Dolphins' carries, 17% target share. Those marks are higher than Todd Gurley. Right? Yeah. That's elite usage. So I wasn't worried about the negative game script because they're going to throw the ball to him a bunch. And indeed, he got 11 targets after last week. I don't know how many targets he got last week, but he was a huge factor in the passing game against New England, even though they were.
This was his 3rd straight week with above 75% of his team's rushing attempts and above 15% of the team's targets, which only Lev has had 3 weeks that high. So, those 2 numbers just show you a diversified workload where he's getting the rushing attempts, he's getting the team's targets. And so, for me, Drake was a lock at his price tag.
So I think that's probably the only thing we did smarter than Josh here, because otherwise we played P. Ryan and Mike Davis. And we've gone over. I didn't think P. Ryan was a bad play. I thought he was a good play.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
I'm looking at the P. Ryan thing and I'm not going to, that's the thing. I'm not going to take the L on any of these guys. I don't think P. Ryan and Davis were bad plays.
No, Davis was for sure a bad play, bro.
Dude, at 4K, I don't think he was. Like, he actually is with the 3-week sample that we had, which, I mean, I know you love the small sample sizes, so I'm surprised you weren't all over Davis. With the sample that we had from Davis,
there was no snow in Seattle. All I saw was a little light rain. What's the boggle?
That's a fair point, Sammy.
Like with the 3-week sample that we had from Mike Davis, like I don't know, it was hard for me to get off Davis at 4K.
Oh, that's just so bad. That's just so bad. I mean, a little maturity, Nate. At least be like me, take the L and move forward, because Davis is just so bad. Like,
let me throw this out there. I'm looking at the box score right now, and Seattle ran 47 plays today. In what world would we envision that Seattle runs 47 plays in the game in this kind of scenario where they're just getting absolutely drilled and they can't do anything with Davis, where Davis is rendered pretty much useless in the offense? I think that's like probably maybe a bottom 5% outcome for that game.
Okay. I mean, add 50% of plays. He got 8 touches. Now add 50%.
Well, that's the thing. He got 8 touches because the game script is completely out of his favor.
Well, but that's the thing. If the game script goes out of his favor, then he has nothing. He is nothing.
But it was out of his favor last week, and he had enough touches to get almost 100 yards, right?
Granted,
I thought he had 90-something last week.
I could be wrong.
I have to go look.
I'll check right now. I got my phone up.
Regardless, I mean, that the scenario envisioned is, even if they're losing, he's going to get enough work to – I mean, he's going to get more than 8 touches that he got today.
Yeah, I think it was a
he'd see in the
10%.
neighborhood of 15 to 20.
Yeah, I thought it was a bottom 10% outcome for Davis. That's why I don't think it was, at 4K, I think when you look at the comparable wide receivers that you were going to take, what are you going to take? Curse? Like, I mean, I don't think Davis was bad. Like, in a vacuum, a 4K play like that you could project for 15 to 16 targets or 15 to 16 touches, like, I don't think that was bad. It didn't work out. I'm not going to say it was a bad play.
It's so bad. It's just so bad. Let's talk about wide receivers. Josh, what'd you do at wide receiver?
I made a mess of it, just a complete mess of it. So after I paid up at running back, it left me pretty much hurting, especially after what I did at tight end. And I made the brilliant decision to go with Brandon Coleman once I saw Teddy Ginn was announced out.
Oh, boy.
I played my chalk in Devin Funchess, and I played my chalk in Dede Westbrook. And both of those guys fell on their face. But, okay. 2 guys fell on their face. One didn't get any target volume. The other one got hurt. And one guy just plain was in the wrong. It was just a dumb decision. Really dumb. That's all I can say about it.
I liked both Funchess and Dede. I thought they were both set up for success. We obviously saw a ton of success from the Jacksonville passing game. So I don't think there was a big issue there. It just didn't go to Dede Westbrook. I didn't watch any of this game, so I couldn't really tell you why. But that game just screwed everybody.
With Marquise Lee going out, I mean, I thought Dede at that point was like going to get all the volume.
Yeah, he'd gotten like a 27% target share.
I don't think Dede was a bad play. I didn't play him, but I don't think he was a bad play.
Not at all. Funchess, obviously, I thought was a great play. Coleman, that's egregious.
The one thing I'll say about Funchess that, looking back on, I think I overvalue, or I didn't value properly, is the return of Greg Olsen. We know that Greg Olsen and Cam have a great connection, and I think I got so excited about Funchess looking at his target share, not realizing that fundamentally that was going to change with Olsen being back.
Olsen played 92% of snaps last week, so you took your 1 week sample and you went with it. It happens.
And I just didn't. Yeah, I should have toned down the Funchess target projection quite a bit.
And here's another place where I goofed up is I had Devontae Adams in that Funchess slot all morning long because I had the money to do it, and then I just at the last second I'm like, you know what, if Rodgers comes in here and just funnels everything toward Jordy Nelson just because that's his boy and it's been a long time, then I'm going to be left looking stupid because I went with Adams instead of Funchess because Funchess is going to eat. That's the only thing I could think of all week was this game is set up for Funchess to destroy the Packers. And instead he got hurt. Me too. Yeah, it was – I think Funchess was a good play. I stand by it. Even if you want to dump down that target projection a little bit, he was getting Julio Jones-type volume since Kelvin Benjamin went out, exact Julio volume.
And it's like, even if he gets a little bit below that for 6.6 against a just deplorable secondary, it just didn't work. But I think that's fine process. Nate.
Yeah, he ended up with 4 targets and 12.9% target share, which
good game. Good game.
Yeah,
good job.
Not gonna work for a 6.5K.
So this was the strength of our lineup, Nate. I thought that this was just as hot as could possibly be. Antonio Brown, Michael Thomas, Devin Funchess, what? Like, that's so hot.
This is why today was so frustrating, is because at 11:45 I felt so good. Like, watch when the good news came out, the same way that Josh pivoted over to Coleman. When the good news came out, I said, I need to get Thomas in my lineup. And I blew up my lineup and said, how do I figure this out? I just said I needed to get Michael Thomas because I thought Michael Thomas's target share was going to be through the roof. The New Orleans had a team total of 31.5, which was 4 points above any other team on the slate. And I felt really good about Michael Thomas. And I thought having Antonio Brown and Michael Thomas were 2 of the best wide receiver plays on the day.
Thomas almost went ham too. He had a
Thomas almost had a 40-point explosion.
Yeah, he had a great day, 24.3 DraftKings points, and he had 1 touchdown where he was a couple inches short of the goal line. They called it a touchdown, but it was really plain to see just with your naked eye that he didn't get in.
Yeah.
And the other one, they called a touchdown, but his foot was clearly on the end line. So he was really close to multiple scores and just didn't quite get there, but he still had a great game. It was a great play.
And he only got the 93 target. So, I mean, he ended up with 24 points, which was obviously great, but he was very close to an explosion spot. So I felt great about Michael Thomas. He could have been at
45 really easily.
Yeah. And I felt great about Michael Thomas. And then Antonio, I mean, there's nothing to say.
There's nothing to say. Obviously, as a Steelers fan, I was on cloud 9 last week, and football giveth and football taketh away. I mean, we talk about tilt, and there's fantasy tilt, and then there's the tilt you feel as a Steelers fan when you are controlling the New England Patriots without Antonio Brown, just putting hands on the Patriots and end up losing the game. Ben throwing that touchdown getting overturned, Jesse James, I knew they were going to overturn it, so tilting. And then I was like, okay, we'll still win or at least kick a field goal and go to overtime. And to throw a pick in that situation, to have Antonio Brown, his leg wrapped around the defender's leg. I mean, it was disgusting. If you saw that thing in slow motion, people are like, what happened? It's like, dude, slow that thing down. His leg wraps around somebody else's leg. It's like a car getting into an accident with a light pole. And
I'm really hoping he comes back for postseason, because the NFL without Antonio Brown's not the same. And there's just been too many injuries this year. It's been a rough season.
Yeah, the product really decreases in terms of quality when all the best players are out. Like, what is this? It's just a bunch of league average players playing against each other. It sucks.
Antonio Brown, too, is just – I mean, there's nobody else like him. And so he just makes the game so much fun to watch and what he can do on the field. So even if he does come back, I hope he comes back, calf stuff like that's always – yeah, you just – overall crappy situation. Even if I didn't have him on my team this week, I would have tilted hard. It was just
I'm still tilting so hard. Like, I just want to destroy my computer, just smash it on the wall.
Let's move away from the tilt of the injury and let's just talk about from a construction standpoint. I think there was a lot of debate all week about Antonio versus Lev, and the reason I ended up going Antonio over Lev, even though I projected Le'Veon for more points in a vacuum, is just I felt much better about the 4K running backs than I did with the 4K wide receivers, And so it was more of just an opportunity cost thing. And that was actually why I ended up on Antonio. And looking at cash games, Lev was significantly higher owned. He was 10 to 15% higher owned, I think, in cash games, which was surprising to me because I thought more people are going to go Antonio. But in almost every cash game I could find, Lev was higher owned.
Well, and that's why you and I ended up on the same lineup, is that we saw things very similar, Nate, that we could get Drake, P. Ryan, and Mike Davis, and get 15 plus touches out of P. Ryan and Davis and 20 plus out of Drake, and then run it back with Brown, Funchess, Thomas, just studs at receiver, Cam Newton, and everything was great. of course, we had to get our 3K Ricky Seals-Jones in there at tight end.
Yeah.
And
had to lock in those 3 points. Gresham was out, so I'm like, oh, he's gonna play 90% of the snaps. What are they gonna do? Nope, Troy Nicholas is gonna get more work.
so this is why this was extraordinarily fish. And Josh, I want to get your opinion on this too. I had Gronk in my cash lineup all week. The first thing, when I was looking at the slate, I'm like, you know what? The first player, the best overall pass catcher on the entire board, receiver, tight end, doesn't matter, is Rob Gronkowski this week. And somehow I changed my lineup by the time the games happened, and I said, Jermaine Gresham's out, Ricky Seals-Jones time, like, it's lit, and it was not lit. Scale of 1 to 10, how fishy was this, my friend?
Yeah, I think you forgot that you needed to sprout some gills for this week so we could talk about something really stupid that we did.
So bad.
And my God, you went out and did something completely stupid, especially with Charles Clay sitting there at 3K this week that was just begging for you to play him. And I thought about Seals-Jones this week too, especially once we saw Gresham was out. And I had a lot of the same logic that you did. Is like, okay, he's played X amount of snaps, so now he's going to graduate to Y amount of snaps. And my other thought was, well, why hasn't he done that already? Why does it take an injury for him to supplant Gresham?
Right.
And that's what made me move off of him this morning, is I don't want to call it epiphany, but, I had that thought that, if he was going to do it, he would have done it already, because Gresham's 100 years old, and Gresham, for all intents and purposes, kind of sucks. And if that was going to happen, it would have happened already. So I decided to go ahead and do what you should have done and roster Gronk.
It's just so obvious. Like, what am I doing? Fishy Seals-Jones.
Especially with the Hogan news. Oh, man.
Dude, it's so bad, Nate. Just so bad.
Yeah. The Ricky Seals is the one thing I actually do feel really fishy about. The rest of the lineup I actually don't feel bad about. I know you feel bad about the Davis thing.
Yes, it's bad. It's bad, and you should feel bad. So you did go with Gronk, Josh, because you're
smiling over here.
Yeah, you're just not
rolling in the dough.
The
listeners can't see it, but Sammy and me are embarrassed about our lineups, embarrassed about our days, and Josh is just rolling in money. He's rubbing.
I am beaming about breaking even this week. Just to tell you the truth, considering the wide receivers that I rostered, to break even is like, that's a celebration lap around the block right now.
It's just the nuts.
I was sweating Gronk, dude. I was sweating him hard into the fourth quarter, because it was just like he had good reception numbers and he had decent yardage, but he had to go ham on that last drive for 69 yards. Nice. And really make his day worthwhile. And then he got the 2-point conversion late in the game to ice it. So it's I don't want to say I lucked out, but I agree with you, Sammy. I thought that he was the best receiving play on the board, the best matchup overall out of anybody else on the board this week.
Bar none. What did you end up doing at defense, Josh?
I went with the Saints. I had the Vikings in there all morning. What I was going to try, I just wanted to stack a running back and a defense that I felt really good about. I had the Vikings in a lot of the morning. They would have offered a little bit more savings over the Saints. But and this is one of the fish things I want to talk about, that I ended up pushing the Saints. And in hindsight, I realized why that was a worse play than the Vikings at this point. I think that the way the Jets run their offense, even with Petty at the helm, it's a conducive offense to getting down the field and chipping away. They're even when they're behind, and they've done a really good job, even against elite teams this year, of kind of keeping it close. They're not getting blown out, so they're not getting into these heavily negative game scripts where it's just hospital ball after hospital ball that's getting picked off by the defense. I mean, they're really kind of keeping things in front of them for the most part. So if I would have thought about that ahead of time and realized that maybe the Jets weren't such an easy target for a defense on the road as we probably thought they were at the beginning of the week, then I might have just locked in Vikings and gone Vikings, because we talked about this last week. The Bengals are dead. They are DOA. And then they were going to go into Minneapolis this week and face a Vikings team that's fresh off a defeat. They're pissed off or whatever. And I just thought that they would absolutely destroy Cincinnati. And I probably should have stuck to my guns and gone defense with Minnesota instead of trying to get cute and pay up for the Saints.
Hey, that brings me to a little tangent and that I wanted to ask you about before we get into DST. But finish your thought. You were about to say something.
I was going to say one of the fish things that I'm glad I did not do this week, which at 9 a.m. this morning I actually had, was I had AJ Green in my cash lineup.
That's what I was going to talk about.
I was sitting there and I just was looking at the volume, the air yard share that he had, and I just said 6.5. This is too cheap. This is too cheap. And all year I had played, volume and opportunity over matchup, and I felt, why would I change my strategy after 14 weeks? But the more I dove into it, the more I realized that from a macro perspective, this just set up so bad for this Bengals team. Like, this was not from a micro standpoint, like AJ Green versus, Xavier Rhodes, but more just from a macro level of this team is falling apart. And, it actually took me off of AJ, and that's what ended up getting me on Michael Thomas. But as of 9 a.m., I had AJ.
So the reason I want to talk about that is this. So you have AJ Green, and he's in a fairly tough matchup against Xavier Rhodes, like you talked about. But he's basically a top 3 volume guy from the receiver position, air yards and market share.
Was.
Yeah, was before today, before going 2 for 30 on 4 targets. Nate, we had DeAndre Hopkins in – obviously, forget about price because Hopkins was too expensive for this. But we have DeAndre Hopkins against Jacksonville, right? Fairly same spot. DeAndre Hopkins got 13 targets, and he goes 4 for 80 and 1. He gets there yet again, right? What's the difference between Hopkins and AJ Green in this matchup? I know Hopkins' volume is higher than Green's, but his individual matchup, Ramsey's better than Xavier Rhodes.
It was a $1,200 difference.
Yeah.
So that was the one thing. It's just,
but that's the thing. If Hopkins was 6,500, would you have played him?
Yeah, I would have had Hopkins 100% at 60.
So why not play AJ Green at that price? What's the difference?
It was just the macro level of the team falling apart in me, and that was it. And I think looking back, here's the thing: AJ still, even after this game, is still 3rd in volume on the year from a receiver standpoint. He's 3rd in weighted opportunity rating. He is. He's got a 29.6% target share, 44.83% of his team's air yards, which is actually more percent of his team's air yards than DeAndre Hopkins or Antonio Brown. AJ's still he's a volume monster. I think Cincinnati at this point was, after getting blown out by the Bears going into Minnesota, I saw this shaping up very bad, and it was as bad as I saw it shape up. So this was a unique situation. It wasn't just DeAndre Hopkins is a bad quarterback, because that doesn't take me off that when we know that from earlier in the season. It was a macro thing. It wasn't a micro thing that took me off of it.
Fair enough. We ended up going with the Redskins at DST. I thought they were just the best cash play all week. 2,800 on DraftKings at home against Blaine Gabbert, who just takes sacks like Davis Maddock puts in bad plays in cash. And they scored 10 points, which was great for 2.8, but I feel like they should add more. They had 5 sacks and 2 turnovers and didn't allow a touchdown.
Well, they were 1 yard. Because it was all the field goals. Literally, they were just marched down the field. I think, what's his name, had 5 field goals, 4 or 5 field goals. It was brutal. And then the frustrating thing was in the first drive of the game, they recovered a fumble, and they were 1 yard away from a TD. And then I thought P-Line was going to get it. And P-Line didn't get it. It went to Crowder. The whole day would have been so different.
It's like you play the Redskins and Pirine stack for this moment. And
that moment. The play shaped up. It was 12:05. I'm like, this day is going exactly how I planned.
Those 6 points would have made all the difference, huh?
Yeah, game script, everything, butterfly effect, it all would have been different. We'd be human beings instead of fish, but instead, here we are.
Breathing in water.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, we got another week to evolve again.
Yeah, we really do. Couple more weeks. I like week 17 because there's so much chaos. Sorting through that chaos. So I'm sure I'll go heavy in week 17.
This was a lot like a week 17 this week, in my opinion. We had some really messed up plays, and we had some guys that were going off that you would never dream of going off in the first 12 weeks of the season.
What, you didn't predict Keenan Cole, Marquise Goodwin, Jadon Mickens, Randall Cobb and Tavares King to be in the top 10 wide receivers this week?
I wasn't quite there. Keelan Cole's the only guy I had slotted in there, to be honest. But the rest of the guys, I didn't have them there.
I mean, this whole week is just, I want to erase it.
It's bizarro week.
Unfortunately, I checked my DraftKings account and I couldn't erase it.
Your DraftKings account got erased.
Don't worry.
I mean, this is probably. I mean, this is week 15. This is probably the 5th bizarro week we've had this year. Like, it's not a once in a while kind of thing. I mean, it's happening all the time. Let's just talk about a couple things that we learned. And I guess I'll start off. I think that Philadelphia was really interesting. They've kind of proven, and I know the Giants defense is weak sauce, so I don't want to like super overrate this, but I think they showed that team is a machine and they have a great system. And Foles is not super incompetent, but you saw them really run basically the same offense that they'd been running with Carson Wentz. And they spread it around a lot. 9 targets for Aguilar, 9 for Ertz, 10 for Jeffrey, then 3 and 2 to a bunch of guys. We saw that, the 4 touchdowns on 237 yards. We saw the the just overstretch on the touchdown projection continue in this game. And I mean, they're just good. They're just good. They're really well coached and their scheme is fantastic. And we'll see what happens when they run into a really good defense, but they're playing Oakland next week and they're at home. And I think we can kind of probably say that that's a really good spot for Philly next week, regardless.
Yeah, it's probably going to be Foles and cash next week, even though I imagine he'll be about 6,300. But I mean, he might be worth a look at that price. To consider the other guys that'll be around him.
So sorry. Okay, so Nate, what was a takeaway for you this week?
I mean, it wasn't like a huge takeaway, but I think just like reviewing all the box scores and like looking at top performers and stuff. I'm just continued to be reminded of like how valuable running backs who get diversified workload is. If you look at the top 10 running backs, it's Gurley, Hunt, Ingram, Bell, Gordon, McCaffrey, McCoy, McKinnon, Drake, and Kamara, and each one of them had above 13% of a team's target share and above 50% of the team's rushing attempts. And it's just like, this is other than McKinnon. But, I mean, bet on diversified volume. I just see it time and time again. And then I fall into a trap where I tried to go with some cheap running backs this week and it bit me, it bit me. I think Gurley should have been somebody who we were looking at much more, and I mean, it wasn't just the touchdowns. It was everything. He's getting 21 rushing attempts. He's getting 3 targets. He's, and
the injuries on Seattle were really piling up. Bobby Wagner was questionable for this game. He ended up playing. KJ Wright was out. Obviously, they have, those 2 members, Thomas and Sherman of Legion of Boom. They're out. This is not the same defense.
I mean, if you just look through the top 10 running back, scores every week, and then you look at the top 10 wide receiver scores, the running back guys, every time you look at it and you go, oh, I should have seen that. I should have seen that. With the wide receiver, you look at it and go, oh, I wouldn't see that coming. I wouldn't see that coming. And it's just like, we know these guys. Just pay up for them. Don't be a fish and pay up for these guys.
Yeah. This is probably the most tilting thing about this week. I don't mean to like sound like a crybaby here or like Ben Pritchett and talk about my mythical dollars, but I felt like I had like some really sharp takes, the Ingram and the have to have Gronkowski, and I had all this Gurley in GPPs because of this, and yet I still lost a bunch of money. And it's like, how did this happen? Why did this happen? Why am I such a fish? I don't get it. Unbelievable. Josh, what about you, man? What was the takeaway for you here?
Yeah, I think for me, the takeaway right now is that Marquise Goodwin is real and Carlos Hyde is dead for all intents and purposes. I mean, they had a good game script today, really, for the most part, with San Francisco, and they kept chucking the ball and throwing through the air.
That's because you got Jimmy G for 380.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they got to get their money's worth out of that guy before they have to pay him this spring. But it's
the G stands for GOAT.
Yes, it did today for sure. For sure. Actually, the G stands for Gould for the most part.
It's so good. So good. Solid gold. 24 points on FanDuel.
It's I was a fish for not using him in my little kicker game that I have going with some of the RG guys. But
that is correct.
Yeah. So, Goodwin is real. They turned him into a legit wide receiver one in that offense. It's amazing what they've done with a guy that's just supposed to be a straight line track star. And they've made him a 10 reception for 114-yard guy on a weekly basis. And I don't see where that's going to start or stop over the next couple of weeks. I think that train keeps rolling. Even if he's 7,000 this coming week, I think we have to think about him pretty seriously considering the volume he's getting.
Yeah. Let's throw KC out there. I know they were on the Saturday game, but ever since we talked about this last week, but ever since Andy Reid gave up that play calling, things have been humming in KC. I think a lot of people expected the Chargers to go in and wreck shop, and it didn't happen, man. They got the whoop put on them, and Kareem Hunt smashed again. This was his second game where he had 100-plus rushing yards and a rushing touchdown and a receiving touchdown. 200-plus total yards. I mean, Kareem Hunt, dude, it kind of reminds me of the Todd Gurley situation where he's a really talented back. When you're running a crap offense, he's not going to get too much. And when you're actually running a good offense, I mean, this is a guy, if he's got a little space, he can smash. So I really like KC's prospects moving forward. They've really showed a lot since they gave up the play calling duties.
Yeah, I mean, the workload Hunt got this week was just insane. I mean, 24 rushing attempts. He had over 75% of his team's rushing attempts with 30% target share. He had 9 targets, and all those were, little dump offs. So he had a high reception rate on those. I mean, it was nuts.
Yeah.
The game plan they ran makes a lot of sense if we consider the strengths of the Chargers defense. They're going to cover your wide receivers and keep those guys pretty well locked up. Now, Tyreek got loose, and Tyreek gets loose on pretty much everyone as long as they decide to throw the ball downfield. But the game plan that Kansas City had to use Hunt so much, it makes a ton of sense. And we have to think about that going forward, considering who the Chargers are going to play, and think about, okay, is their offensive coordinator smart enough to realize that they need to operate their offense through the running back in order to score and move the ball downfield against the Chargers? And I'm not sure if we will see that. It'll be nice if it does happen that way. It will give us somebody else that we can look at in our lineups every week, especially for cash. But, whether Kansas City pulls this off over the next 2 weeks, I'm not really sure. They may decide to do something else with their offense. And I probably just got to study that pretty close this week and see how it works out.
Well, next week, week 16, they're at home against Miami. So that's all the studying that I need to do.
Yeah, that's enough. We're going to smash Hunt.
That's it. Smash Hunt, depending on Goodwin, maybe some Foles. I mean,
What are we going to do with Drake in that game?
Lock.
I mean, if Damian Williams is out, depending on his price, we could look at it right now, but I don't really feel like it. I assume he'll be up to like mid-60s.
Probably 65.
Yeah.
I'm thinking 6,500.
I think so. So that's the point where he's not an auto jam, but if he's at 65, he's probably still a pretty solid play. Yeah. So
yeah, I think I agree with that.
Anything else for you, Josh? Key takeaways?
No, I don't think so. We talked about it's just a kind of a bizarre week. Some things that we thought were going to happen just kind of short-circuited, really. One thing I think is going to be interesting to watch, though, is with Antonio Brown missing effectively the next 2 games, do we expect Juju Smith-Schuster to draw Brown's volume? I think that's very possible. Yeah. He could be the double-digit target guy in that offense. I don't see them giving those targets to Bryant or Eli Rogers. Is Darius Hayward-Bay going to get a slight uptick in volume? I don't think so. The guy kind of stinks.
He got hurt too.
Yeah, and he got hurt too. And
Sammy's the Steeler homer, so he would know better. But I don't
think
you're
the honk, man. Tell us, is it?
I don't think Bryant's role changes. I think it's all Juju. I think Bryant's role is going to continue to be what he is. And Juju is the one who's going to see those targets, with Lev getting a little bit more specific game plan around him. But
fully accurate. I believe that. And also, I mean, you have to look at their matchup next week. They're at Houston on Christmas Day, and Houston's got a really bad pass defense. So this is going to be a pretty good smash spot. But I think if you just want to play it safe, I think jamming in Lev Bell is the thing. They've shown that they're a little less pass happy on the road. They showed today, obviously the game script was in their favor, but when Antonio Brown went out, they especially made Juju Lev the focal point of the game. I mean, he was getting the rock all the time. So I think the Juju's a great play. Martavis is an okay play, but I think it's probably I'm just going to go Lev depending on the pricing here.
So do we think there's a possibility next week in Houston that we get bad Ben Roethlisberger on the road in a noon kick where he's just not awake for the game yet?
Oh, yeah. It could easily be. Yeah, hungover Ben, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, certainly. I mean, Ben splits, and, I've tried to just, ignore these because I think there's a lot of noise in them, just in the sense that quarterbacks in general score more at home than they do on the road. So is Ben splits that much worse as a base?
This is going to be where the rubber meets the meat.
Yeah, what's Ben without AB?
Yeah, Ben without AB scares me.
Yeah,
a lot.
But he's still got Bell, and I think he has a reasonable replacement in Smith-Schuster.
Yeah,
he's not quite Antonio Brown God level, but I think he's let's call him a demigod at this point, because I think Smith-Schuster could do a lot of the things I think that Antonio Brown does on the field. He's a good route runner. I mean, granted, he's just a kid, right? He's a baby still in his diapers on the football field, but he can ball. That kid can ball, and I think he's going to be a reasonable facsimile of Antonio Brown for the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, they'll use him like Brown.
Sitting over here with his thesaurus, looking up these facsimile. What other words if you pulled out today?
Menagerie.
I have that written down. I'm going to use that in my column next week. That's 100% happening. Let's move a little bit and finish this thing out talking about the primetime slate. There's actually 3 games on the primetime slate on DraftKings this week, which is fun. We have Atlanta at Tampa Bay tonight. Atlanta's a 4.5-point favorite. We have Indy at Baltimore. Baltimore's 13-point favorites. And then we have a kind of fun game, Minnesota at Green Bay. There's no line out yet on this game because I think that they're not sure if Aaron Rodgers will play. Because Green Bay, with the loss today, I don't know if they for sure got eliminated, but I think they did. And is it reasonable for them to continue to play Aaron Rodgers if their playoff hopes are gone and his collarbone is only 80%? Why would you throw him back out there? So I think we should talk about it, assuming Aaron Rodgers will play, but I think there's somewhat of a reasonable chance that he doesn't.
And Minnesota also might not play some of their guys because Minnesota's locked it up. So
I don't know. That Mike Zimmer does not strike me as a coach that's going to pull his guys. I think he's going to play his guys regardless of what the record is. Even if they've got the number 1 seed locked up for some reason, I think he's still going to play his guys.
Yeah, and that's the thing.
School, man.
I hate when teams start resting their guys in week 16 and then they have a bye. It's like, okay, so they don't play 16, 17, we're the bye, and now they haven't played in almost a month by the time the first game rolls around.
If I'm a GM, I'm ordering my coach to do that. I mean, you guys saw what happened with Antonio. Why would you, if you have that locked up, don't risk it. If Diggs or Thielen or, McKinnon goes out, I mean, your postseason hopes are done. I don't know. If I'm a coach, I'm being sharp here, but NFL is not sharp. So
here's the thing, though. I don't have all the tiebreakers in front of me. Philly's 12-2, Minnesota's 11-3, but then there's 3 10-4 teams: the Saints, the Panthers, and the Rams. So I don't think the Vikings have. I don't think they have a first-round bye locked up by any stretch. In fact, just mathematically, they don't, with 2 games left and a 1-game lead if they lost their last 2 games. So I think they'll play all their guys.
Well, then let's just break it down with everybody playing. Quarterback's interesting because I think, if you would have told me at the beginning of the year that we would have gotten Case Keenum and Matt Ryan at the same price tag, and I would be debating playing Case Keenum over Matt Ryan,
Keenum's a lock for me.
But Keenum going up against Green Bay is a lock. But also this is Matt Ryan going up against Tampa Bay. This is a great spot too. It's a nice spot for both of them. They're both at 6-3.
If Ryan was at home, I'd like it a whole lot more. But
it's safe for Keenum.
Yeah, for sure. I'd still depending. Obviously Green Bay can have really bad weather around Christmas time, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. But I don't know, man. I like the kid Keenum. He just gets it done, and he just gets it done always.
Yeah.
So I think my play.
Yeah, for me, the tournament play here is Flacco at home against Indianapolis. Just a terrible pass defense. We saw Osweiler go out there and have a game against them on Monday night, on Thursday, Saturday, whatever the hell it was. Anyway, it was a bad game, and I watched it, and I feel ashamed of myself. But I think it's possible Flacco could go out there and have a game against Indianapolis this week. And at 5,300, if you're going to do some expensive things at wide receiver and running back, he kind of makes a little bit of sense as I want to say a punt play, but he's a guy that could get you, I think, 250 yards and 2 touchdowns, and you'd take that at 5,300, I think.
For sure.
Nobody's playing Brissett, though. Like, none of us are going to play Brissett, not even in a tournament, right? You can't do it.
100% not. I mean, I don't even care that you mispronounce his name. He's so bad he doesn't deserve correct pronunciation. So Brissett it is.
Well, I should have called him Brisket, right?
Yeah. Because
Brissett.
All right. So quarterback, I like Keenum. Nate, you like Keenum too?
Yeah, it's either Keenum or Ryan for me. I think Ryan should be in play for tournaments.
Okay. Let's move over to running. Go ahead.
Real quick, though, we've got Winston sitting there right in front of us. We haven't talked about him yet. He is playing at home. It's a divisional game. We've seen him light up Atlanta before, but we think Tampa Bay is pretty toxic right now, right?
Not just Tampa Bay. I don't think he's healthy. Like, I mean, even though he came back, like, there's just something wrong with Winston. I'm not playing him. I've fallen in that trap too many times this season.
Yeah, Tampa definitely toxic. Like, not quite Bengals level toxic, but they're getting there. They're a little septic. For sure.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and lock in Winston for 350 and 3 this week because we all hate him.
Hashtag facts. Yeah. Running back position, I think that Devonta Freeman is obviously a lock with Tevin Coleman out at 6.2 against Tampa. And I believe that Tampa is going to have one of their linebackers out as well. I think Levante David is not going to play in this game. And Levante David is probably their best linebacker. Him and Quan Alexander are both good, but I think David's real good, and I don't think he's playing.
So do we think that Devonta Freeman gets an uptick on his volume with Coleman out, or do we think that's just something that Teron Ward comes in and sucks up that same Tevin Coleman role, and we really don't see much volume change for Freeman?
I think it's about half, right? I think it's about a halfway meet. In terms of, I don't think Freeman's going to get all of the missing volume from Coleman. I think Ward will get some. But remember a couple weeks ago when Freeman was out and Ward had a really critical fumble? That's one of those things that coaches look at and they're like, I don't really trust this fool like as much as I should. So I could easily see him getting 5-6 carries, a target or two, but I think that they're going to lean on Freeman here a little more than they would. So I'd say, a slight uptick for Freeman's volume.
Yeah, I'd agree.
So
I also really like McKinnon in this spot, going up against Green Bay. They've shown that they are really, really rough at stopping passing backs. And so I think McKinnon would be in a smash spot here.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I like Aaron Jones for a lot of the same reasons in that I think if we think Green Bay's going to be behind just like they were today, I think it's going to be Jones more than Williams getting the volume there.
Yeah, and Williams has had such a good run, but I think it's just so obvious. I'm not like a pro scout or anything, but it's so obvious that Jones is better than Williams. It just is. And in some critical drives, they put in Jones, and then they obviously put him in when they were behind. The thing about Jones is he's not as nearly as good of a pass protector. Like, he gets blown up in pass protection, and that's one thing you do have to worry about against Minnesota. They have Danielle Hunter and who's the other guy? Their other end that's super good. His name's escaping me, but bottom line, their 2 defensive ends are both super good. So, we'll see how that affects Jones, but I completely agree that he's like a really strong tournament play here for sure.
Yeah, I agree with that. Go ahead, Sammy.
I was just going to say, any love for Alex Collins here for you, Nate?
Yeah, I think Alex Collins is definitely in play. I just think I still get scared of Alex Collins. I think we look at him like a Kenyon Drake type guy, but he's not. He's in a three back situation where Javorius takes work from him, and Danny Woodhead will still get some passing work. So, I like him, but I don't want to go crazy with him.
Yeah, for me, it's Freeman, and I think the pivot's Aaron Jones, and I feel really good about that. If you're if you're just going GPP status, I think Collins is in a great spot. I think Indy's kind of shutting it down. They gave up 158 to CJ Anderson. CJ
Yeah,
Anderson.
they never really had it going in the first place.
That's pretty true. Any love for a guy like Frank Gore here? Frank Gore's exceedingly cheap, and he's in an awful, awful spot. Would either of you guys consider him in tournaments?
I'd consider Mac over him.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't want any part of the Indy running game against Baltimore. Zero.
Yeah, I feel like I've considered Mac like several times this season and just say, this is a great spot for Mac, and it just never happens for him. He just never does anything.
They don't give him the volume. They don't give him any work.
Yeah.
I mean, we thought he was going to get the work against Denver, and he didn't. They still gave it to Gore. So they're committed to Gore. They're going to ride that guy to the grave.
Yeah.
I just think as the season goes on, he's got to start getting some wear and tear. I mean, he's had some crazy amount of volume. So I just think any day now we're going to see Mac have a game where he just gets – I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, we'll see. Any other running back plays? Would you guys potentially think about Javoris Allen over Collins as a tournament pivot?
Absolutely.
I can see that. I mean, Javorius has a bunch of talent. We've seen what Javorius does when he gets the volume. So I'm always about that.
All right, so let's shift to receiver. Receivers are a really fun position on this slate. Really fun because there's a lot of expensive guys and a lot of really good players. You got Julio at Tampa Bay. Seems like a smash spot. Obviously, he had that game against Tampa earlier in the season, not too long ago. That was fantastic. We have Thielen against that Green Bay secondary. Same with Diggs. We finally saw the return of Diggs this week. Even though he didn't smash, he had a nice touchdown. Evans, Jordy Nelson, Devontae Adams. It's probably highly questionable that he plays on kind of a short turnaround. But then you have guys like Sanu, Randall Cobb. I mean, Josh, talk to me a little bit about who your main targets are here.
I think for me, I think Julio's obviously, going to be the chalkiest guy. And I think I would start my lineups with Julio. And like you said, it's a fun slate. I think if I was to go down from Julio, a couple of the other guys I really like, I think Thielen's going to be going to smash here. And then my other guy I'd like in the same game is Cobb, because I think we can plan on Devontae being out with the concussion, it being a short week. I think, Cobb's going to get a ton of work here, especially if they get behind. I think Cobb can see a bunch of different targets here, and he won't have to deal with the road shadow that I think that we're going to see for Jordy. So yeah, I think Cobb, Thielen, Julio are some of the guys I'd be paying up for. But overall, I think it's a really fun wide receiver slate.
It is, and you can get, obviously on a 3-game slate, you're going to do some things if you want to take down a GPP that are really non-standard. I certainly think that you could do something like go with Sanu over Julio Jones. We've seen those guys get not even that disparate of a target volume, right? So We've seen that, maybe Sanu can toss another touchdown, keep that perfect record going. I don't know. You brought up Randall Cobb. We saw him score yesterday. And I think that when Green Bay gets behind, we've seen a lot that they do these little quick smoke screen passes a lot from Aaron Rodgers, maybe little RPOs where it's just, quick out to the slot receiver.
He saw 15 targets this week. He saw 15 targets.
He saw 15 targets? Holy cow. But part of that's got to be with Adams going out, right?
Yeah, it was 14. But Adams should be out again. If it's a short week with the concussion, it's hard to get back by Saturday.
Yeah, and that's the other thing.
Targets, my bad.
That's the other thing. I think that if he's out, we need to look at Geronimo Allison as well. We saw Allison get 8 targets in his stead. He bonered it a bunch. He had that critical fumble at the end. They were not on the same page, him and Rodgers, in several spots. I mean, he's just does really bad things. But he got 8 targets in, a half of football. And so if you project a lot of volume, I think that's probably the guy not a lot of people will play, but could potentially have some pretty decent target volume in this game.
Definitely.
What about for you, Josh? Who are kind of some of the main targets at receiver, the guys you're making a priority on this slate?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I'm probably going to be looking at both the Minnesota guys, Thielen and Diggs. Diggs finally got in the box today. It was good to see that. it's going to be really hard for me to turn away from T.Y. Hilton in tournaments. We know that, Baltimore's gotten busted up on the back end pretty good. And T.Y. is a guy that could probably get loose if they could just give, Brissett. Now, see, I can say his name right now, Brissett.
No, I like it the other way. He has not.
Like Brissett.
He doesn't earn it.
The fish pronunciation, Brissett. So if he can get, let's say 3 seconds to throw the ball before somebody's on top of him, then I think T.Y. can get loose for a long touchdown. Again, I think it's just a really low percentage tournament play. I like the call on Cobb. I think that's a pretty good idea this week. Maybe as a little bit of a proxy for the run game that they might run with Aaron Jones. I think Cobb's a decent pivot off of the run game for Green Bay if they decide to go that direction. Maybe another top play. Golly, I'm trying to look down at the cheap guys to see if there's anybody that sticks out. You mentioned Geronimo Allison. I think he's worth a shot in some situations. Otherwise, maybe Deshaun Jackson. But otherwise, I'm probably locked into the guys I just talked about.
Man, I'm done with Deshaun Jackson. That freaking scrub. So many times I've been like, okay, this is a great spot. Like when Mike Evans is locked up by a strong corner and he's going to get shadowed. And I'm like, dude, single coverage for Deshaun Jackson. He's going to get loose for one sometime. And it just hasn't happened. Like this is just, and I had him in a bunch of best ball too. He was like, not one of my main guys, but every time he was there, like right around that 7th round, I was like, oh yeah, it's Deshaun Jackson. Like he's going to have 3 or 4 games where he just smashes, but he has not. So,
to be fair, though, Jameis has dealt with that shoulder issue all year. So,
yeah.
I mean, I think, if he sticks next year you could see that connection light up.
Yeah. Once they get a decent offensive guy in there instead of Dirk Cutter, who is an absolute bozo.
Yeah.
So let's move over to tight end unless you guys have any other wide receivers you'd like to mention here. Okay. Tight ends. I mean, the main tight ends here, obviously with 3 games, there's going to be more available. You have Rudolph, Doyle, Brait, O.J. Howard, Ben Watson, who goated on Sunday, finally, when Davis Maddock did not have him in cash games. We got Hooper. Nate, I know the guy that you like is going to be Doyle. Wax poetic about Doyle for a quick second here.
Yeah, I mean, I like Doyle a lot, but I also really like Rudolph in this spot. Green Bay is just, you want to pick on their secondary. I think both Rudolph and Doyle will be the 2 that I'd be looking at the most. There's not much to say about Doyle. Everybody knows my feelings on him. So,
what about for you, Josh? Who do you like here?
Yeah, I don't mind Doyle just because he's a target monster. Rudolph, he's, I think we all agree he's pretty much just a really awesome floor play every week. He's going to get 5 catches for 30-something yards and hopefully get in the box. I'm interested in O.J. Howard this week.
Yes.
I'm kind of done with Cameron Brate. I think the offense is kind of done with him. It seems that way that they've just trended over to Howard as the tight end in the offense, at least from a receiving sense. So I would be more than willing to look at him for $3K. I think he offers a lot of flexibility. Austin Hooper, I have zero interest in him. He's just not getting the target volume. They don't throw him the ball, which is really strange considering that they really don't have a lot, my opinion, they don't have a lot of receiving firepower around him outside of Julio Jones and Sanu. They don't use Gabriel the way that he was used last year, and they're really just not giving Hooper the volume. So I really don't have any interest in him.
I really like Howard. You were talking about Brait getting phased out. He was down to like 40% snaps last week. We saw Howard go, I think he was 4 for 54 and a touchdown on 6 targets. I think he's probably the cheap guy that I'm going to go after here to get off of the chalk to differentiate at tight end. It's just a variable position in general, but I think I'll be overweight on Howard for sure. Last position, defense special teams. I think Baltimore is the nuts. So, Nate, give me one defense that you will use besides the Baltimore Ravens.
I mean, that's a good. The one thing I will say about Baltimore is I think, this week a lot of the narrative was, oh, Jimmy Smith's gone, so they're dead, they've fallen apart, which I just didn't buy. So I think Baltimore is definitely obviously going to be in play versus Brissett. But, I mean, if I had to take somebody, I think Atlanta would be the defense that I would look at outside of them just because I don't trust what's going on with Jameis' shoulder. He's avoiding answering questions about it. I think Jameis loves to make mistakes, and I think Atlanta can capitalize on that.
What about for you, Josh?
Yeah, I agree with the Falcons play. I think that's the right play to make this week, just based on all the factors that Nate mentioned. I do like the Vikings quite a bit, but I think the Vikings are going to be the chalk based on how much they smashed yesterday. And if we think that Green Bay is going to be putting Hundley back in, then to me, the Vikings I think they're a lock.
Oh, yeah.
They're on the road. I think they're a lock.
If Hundley's in for sure. Against Aaron Rodgers. I mean, we saw Rodgers. I mean, he was pretty uneven in this game. He threw 3 picks. He was just out of sync, and you expect this with a, whatever, 7-week layoff, what have you. I just don't know that I could use them against Rodgers at home with another week of preparation. Remember last week, our like big call right at the end was, hey, if you want to smash on this slate and do something super contrarian, take the Miami Dolphins against New England, and that ended up.
That was all Josh.
Well, not all Josh. I mean, that was also like
it was a team effort.
Yeah, whatever, Nate. But
we stopped just short of calling the Dolphins onslaught.
That's right. I think I said the words Dolphins onslaught, and I will bet Bitcoin that I actually said it. So, but
we're fish. That's our job.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to go back to the fish well, and I'm going to say that if you want to attack this slate in a really contrarian way, Tampa Bay. That's
100% agree with that.
I don't think I'd go to Indianapolis, but I would say, hey, do Tampa Bay, get their defense in, Howard, maybe some Evans, something like that, and say that they smash and stay off of Atlanta. And I think that's the contrarian way that has a somewhat, reasonable chance of happening. So
yeah, I agree with that. I think the Tampa defense, I think they have an opportunity to turn the ball over quite a bit. We saw them do that with Stafford last week, where they suckered him in some really dumb throws, just really basic cover 2 looks as well. And I think we've seen Matt Ryan make some dumb throws into some looks where he's been suckered. And I think they could do the same thing this week, Tampa Bay, that is. So I really don't mind that play at all. I think that's a good team to onslaught this week if you want to go really against the grain.
Well, gentlemen, next week is week 16, the seasonal fantasy finals. I'm not sure what our schedule will be. Obviously, next Monday is Christmas, so we'll discuss and figure out with corporate what the podcast schedule is going to be. But I would highly doubt that anyone's going to be listening to this podcast on Christmas morning. So we'll figure that out. We'll send the news out on Twitter. But if I don't talk to you guys, I hope you have a very Merry Christmas, and I hope the slate goes better for you next week than it did for us today. Merry Christmas to all you guys listening. We really appreciate, you guys having so much fun with us on the pod, just being with us to tilt and make fun of each other all season. For Nate, you can find him on Twitter at Nate Nohling, Josh on Twitter at FantasyADHD, myself, Sammy Reid, on Twitter at SammyReidFI. Have a very Merry Christmas, and hopefully we will talk to you soon.